My friends, good day. Business aviation in the United States has a very bad reputation. And as tonight's report clearly illustrates, it's a reputation that is not entirely undeserved. It's March 3rd, 2023 in the United States, and there's a Challenger 300 aircraft that's going to fly between two secondary airports in the country. Sometime before the passengers arrive, the co-pilot is doing the pre-flight inspection because the aircraft simply spent the night in a hangar, and then you have to walk around to make sure everything's fine. While he's doing his inspection, a guy shows up with some ice. Because indeed you have to put ice on the plane so the passengers can chill their drinks. At that moment, the co-pilot interrupts his inspection and goes with the guy inside the plane to show him where to put the ice. With that, he goes back to his inspection, but he resumes it at a different spot from where he was interrupted. Somewhere, all the critical operations, if we stop them, we can't guarantee we'll resume at the same point. So by accepting this interruption, well, he put the integrity of what he was doing at risk. Afterwards, the captain arrives. There are 3 passengers, the doors close, we have 5 people, and then the plane is cleared to taxi. He gets to the runway entrance, starts rolling down it, and then suddenly the co-pilot notices that on his side, so on the right, the airspeed indicator isn't moving. It reads 0, the speed is stopped. He reports it to the captain. And while they're going at about 104 knots, 190 kilometers per hour, roughly speaking, they're about to take off. Literally, they decide to abort the takeoff, which in itself is a good thing. So they abort the takeoff, they brake, and they exit onto the taxiway. Then the co-pilot says, "I'd still like to get out, walk around the plane, and see if I forgot anything." Suddenly, he realizes his inspection might have been sloppy. The captain shuts down the left engine to allow him to open a door, go down a mobile staircase, and take a look. Indeed, he finds that on the right pitot, which is a kind of pointed metal probe that faces forward, which is there to collect, to measure, to allow the measurement of airspeed. So in reality, the speed of the plane. While this one had a cover. In the evening, we cover almost everything on the planes, especially the probes, to keep out dust, insects, and debris. But the first thing, let's say, the constant concern of every pilot is to make sure these covers are removed. He had forgotten one. So he removes it on the taxiway, gets back into the plane, the left engine is then restarted, and the pilots decide to take a long ride on the taxiway. Come back, line up on the runway to take off. It's a serious mistake for 2 reasons. The first reason is a philosophical one. That is to say, if we messed up to the point where we left a cover that says remove before flight and we forgot it, what else did we forget? What else did we do? It means that this flight is very poorly prepared and it must be stopped. We need to come back, think about what we've done, and then review everything from scratch. But another theoretical mistake is that these planes are modern machines, very complicated, equipped with many computers, processors, all that, and they share data with each other. On an older aircraft, a Cessna 172, a Boeing 737-200, or, God forbid, a Lockheed Constellation, since the installed devices are all independent, self-contained as they say, independent from each other. You can do that. If you forget a cover, just remove it and it will work again. On an ultra-modern aircraft, it's much more complex than that. When you do that kind of thing, you're going to trigger side effects that are very hard to predict. That's what's going to happen in the case of this flight. So once they restart and come back to the runway, they notice that an error has appeared. It's an error that says rudder limiter fault. On these planes, there's a rudder, and this rudder has a limiter. Because it's simple on twin-engine planes, since they're supposed to be able to handle asymmetry caused by an engine failure during takeoff when their speed is relatively low. Well, the rudder is generally oversized. It's huge. It's a huge surface. It's capable of a pretty large deflection. So these aircraft, whether it's Boeing, Airbus, Challenger 300 like this one, are equipped with a limiter. It's a system that will analyze the speed, and then, depending on the speed, it will limit the deflection of the rudder to prevent the pilot from inadvertently making too abrupt a movement and causing damage. They see this error, they look at it and say, what do we do? And then, well, we'll just ignore it and go. Yet, if they had looked at their documentation, and actually, you don't even need a technical service bulletin. 10, they had looked at the docs. The documentation says this error means we can't go or leave, but in reality, especially with airplanes, that's not always the case. Any errors related to flight surfaces, related to flight controls, are generally no-go. You don't need to have gone to Saint-Cyr. If there's a problem with any flight surface or device or system associated with it, like a trim tab, like a U-damper, like a limiter or something else, it's generally a no-go. But they decide to go anyway. So, hello, throttle up, accelerate. During acceleration, they notice another problem, which is that the flight director stays completely at the upper limit. First, second, they notice that the speeds associated with takeoff, what we call V1 rotation speed, V2, which are normally displayed, are not showing up. Strange. The speed tape is active, so the airspeed indicator is working, yes, but the takeoff speeds, which are normally in the flight management system, are not showing up. The sensor says, this is serious, I'm messing up the memories. I'm very experienced with this plane, however he wasn't, having only 88 flight hours while the co-pilot had 78 hours on this aircraft. We have two guys who, despite their experience, aren't very familiar with this plane. For example, 5,000 flight hours as a captain on other planes doesn't mean he's highly experienced with this aircraft. Subtitles ST, the captain says, keep going, it's okay. They're accelerating from memory, or maybe just by guesswork, as we say. They'll think, okay, give me a rotation, then they lift the plane and take off. They're climbing 400 feet up when our alarm sounds. This time we report the TRIM isn't working. If you want, and here, this is really going to be key for what's coming next. The trim, if you want. At the back of the plane, there's an adjustable horizontal stabilizer that moves slowly. There's a kind of worm screw that moves it. It moves either because the pilot wants to move it, or most often because the autopilot is going to move it. And actually, it ensures that the plane is balanced at the speed it's flying. Considering its speed and center of gravity is about the trim, suddenly they get an alert saying it's not working, so they decide to continue their climb. And then they turn on the autopilot and it accepts to take control of the plane. This is unusual in this aircraft because in most airliners, when there's a trim problem, the autopilot doesn't engage. In this case, it engages, so it will engage. The aircraft is climbing. It's been about 8 or 9 minutes since they took off. And then there's an alert that appears on the dashboard that says autopilot hold nose down. What does that mean? It means that the autopilot is using more and more force to keep the nose of the plane down. It means that the aircraft is out of trim, as we say. Because since the autopilot can't manage the trim and the speed increases, the plane tends to pitch up. If a plane is trimmed at a low speed, when the speed increases, it will tend to pitch up. So here, there's a strong nose-up moment that the autopilot can't trim against, but it could use the trim. What does it do? It will use the elevator, so it will push on the control column. If you want, apply more pressure to counter this very strong tendency that the plane has and that it has. In short, the pilots see this, grab their checklist and realize they'll need to troubleshoot this situation. While they've taken the wrong checklist or they haven't looked at it properly, but in any case, it's written clearly and you can even guess it without a checklist. since the autopilot is keeping the nose down with more and more force. Depending on what you touch, the autopilot will eventually give up. What will the control stick do? The control stick will move abruptly. What will the plane do? It will pitch up sharply. It will give in to its natural tendency at that moment. So the least you can do is keep your hands on the control stick, and very, very, very firmly. They won't do that without touching the control stick. They'll say to themselves, well, what should I do? And they decide to do a little reset, right, of the system that manages the TRIM. So they say to themselves, okay, we'll turn it off, then we'll turn it back on. That'll give it a little reset, and then we'll see what happens. So we take control there. He's going to turn it off. We're going to turn it off. This time, the autopilot realizes there's no trim at all, and it's going to give up. It's going to disconnect. At the moment when the autopilot disconnects, we have this plane that pulls up sharply, like some fighter jets do. It's going to pitch up abruptly. It's going to go through from 3 degrees to 11 degrees in 1 second. And we have 4G. We have 4G of acceleration. That means the passengers are completely crushed, completely pressed to the floor. The captain realizing that the plane is pitching up and that it even threatens to break apart. This plane is certified for 2.6 G, so 4G is extremely high for a commercial aircraft. So what does he do? Instinctively, he's going to push on the control stick, and he's going to push with a lot of force. The force was measured. It's recorded. It's about 45 kg, so he's going to push hard. When he pushes, what does the plane do? The plane will return to horizontal, but very quickly, causing negative G's, this time -2 or 3. What do the passengers do? A passenger who isn't strapped in under such circumstances will hit the ceiling. That's clear. It has happened in other cases on other airliners in similar situations. They literally found footprints, shoe prints from passengers' soles on the roof, or rather on the ceiling of the cabin. Isn't that right? So the pilot makes the plane dive. He realizes he overdid it. He eases up on the stick a bit, and the plane does. Another trick, he pulls a 4G at that point. The number of jets gets extremely high. That the flight data recorder says to itself, this is a crash, and starts recording. That means the crash detector of the flight data recorder, caption father, is going to go into service and decide that, well, with all that, it's definitely a crash and it's going to stop recording. So we don't have the recording of what happened next. The pilots more or less managed to regain control of their aircraft and stop this roller coaster motion, which probably continued for 3 or 4 cycles. It's very hard to know. Memories are a bit fragile in these situations. There were passengers who thought they were going to die, who thought the plane was going to break apart, and they were right. The plane had reached accelerations consistent with that outcome. So once they managed to regain control, the co-pilot leaves the cockpit. And there he will find that one of the passengers was not wearing a seat belt. Subtitles MFP, because the pilots forgot, before doing their troubleshooting, they forgot to make an announcement to the passengers telling them to fasten their seatbelts. She was not wearing her seatbelt. It seems that just before they started this maneuver, she wanted to go to the restroom or something like that. Anyway, in private jets, one of the big luxuries is that many people don't wear their seatbelts, even during takeoff and landing. And so during the negative G part, she hit against the cabin, which is damaged in at least 2 places. You can see impact marks where this person probably hit with her head and she was unconscious there. So they asked the air traffic controllers to give them vectors for a quick landing. They arrive, they land, the firefighters are there, an ambulance is there. The person is taken to the hospital where they will die from their injuries later that evening. Her name was Dana Hyde. She was 55 years old and she was close to the Clintons and the Obamas. Let those who think badly of it beware. It really, really looks like an accident. In fact, she was someone who worked with the United Nations and the White House under several administrations. And the news of her death spread across the United States, if not the world, in March 2023. And one of the causes that was put forward at that time was probably turbulence. There you go, a plane experienced turbulence. They started to involve, of course, climate witnesses like, well, is it global warming or climate change, whatever you want to call it. And actually, we realized later that it wasn't that at all. There hadn't been any turbulence. And that turbulence, in general, is quite rare for it to be fatal. And usually turbulence just causes injuries. More often the flight crew get injured, more often the cabin crew, the stewards, the flight attendants and all that. During turbulence, most passengers are usually seated and buckled up as recommended. But the cabin crew are moving around, they're moving forward with very heavy carts and all that. Many times, sudden turbulence hits, the cart lifts, a flight attendant falls and it lands on their legs. It has often happened that the crew got injured. Now, what really happened? Why? Why were there all these problems? So let me tell you, in this aircraft, of course, since it's a modern aircraft, there are data circuits, data sharing between various systems. And actually, there is the Air Data Computer 1 and Air Data Computer 2. In fact, these are Air Data Computers. These are computers that will determine the speed, that will calculate it using, among other things, information from the pitot tubes outside. So they will take the information, process the speed, and share it with various systems that need to know the speed. Among others, for example, one of the systems is the rudder limiter. Because this limiter, of course, since it will allow an angle that depends on the speed, it's a kind of downward curve like this. The slower the plane is, the higher the angle. The faster the plane is, the lower the angle it allows. It needs speed. So if it doesn't have speed information, it can't work. Now, there's something in the logic of this plane. If there's a difference of more than 20 knots, which is huge, between the speed calculated by Air Data Computer 1 and Air Data Computer 2, if there's a difference of more than 20 knots, for more than a few seconds, at that point, we'll inject into various systems the information we believe. The speed is invalid. And at that point, it's going to inhibit a lot of systems. It will inhibit the MAC trim, and even manual trim will be much slower. It's going to inhibit the speeds remain associated with takeoff. It's going to inhibit the flight director. It's going to reduce. I mentioned the speed. Actually, it's going to inhibit a lot of things. How do you refer to all that? Actually, you have to reset everything. You have to reset the plane. We need to call Microsoft's technical support to reboot Windows. So what you have to do is literally stop everything. You have to shut down the plane and restart it. At that point, it restarts again. But the idea of just going to get the tube, getting the plastic, the cover, taking it off, it's too late. The disaster had already happened because the information that we believed the speed was invalid had already been fed into the systems. And the fact that he removes the cover won't change anything. The speed is considered invalid. It will remain invalid throughout the entire flight. So taking off with that, well, it's a very bad idea, of course. There you go. Out of 5 people, it still caused a woman's death, which was completely unnecessary. It's not at all an accident that is very, very easily avoidable, even without pilot training. Just with a bit of common sense, that's it. But common sense, is maybe the thing that's most lacking, most missing these days. In any case, thank you for watching this video up to this point. Thanks to those who make it possible. I don't thank enough those who make the existence of this channel possible through Patreon. And then I'll see you in the next video. And then I'll see you in the next video. And then I'll see you in a future video.